Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Captain Devon Ellis sat 2 chairs from the end, her coffee untouched, the smell of burnt beans already stale in the Afghan heat. Around her, the men talked in clipped, coded sentences, terrain models, grid numbers, fuel logistics, but no one looked at her. The woman who'd once flown every emergency sortie in the region now sat silent, grounded, dismissed. 8 months since she'd been told she wasn't fit to fly again. 8 months since command decided her judgment was emotionally compromised. She stared at the map projected across the wall, Shakir Valley, a scar of rock and ruin she knew by reputation alone. Every pilot knew it. A place where sound went to die and rescue missions followed it. She'd heard the numbers: 94% aircraft loss, 37 lives gone trying to pull men from its jaws. They called it the kill zone. But no one called it what it really was: a graveyard of decisions. Devon's thumb traced the scar along her shoulder, a thin white line of shrapnel memory. She had earned that mark 3 years ago when an A-10's cockpit turned into a coffin of smoke and fire, and she still brought the bird home on one engine. She used to take pride in it. Now it just itched when she sat still too long. They told her to rest. "Reevaluate your priorities," her commanding officer said. "You did the right thing, but in the wrong way." The words that ruin pilots. She looked down at her flight badge, Thunderbolt 42. Her aircraft was parked 40 meters away, sealed under Hangar 12's shadow, still whole, still waiting. She'd come to the bench outside that hangar every day since grounding, like a widow visiting a grave. Sometimes she wondered whether she missed flying more than breathing. A young mechanic walked past, grease on his arms, sweat streaking dust down his neck. He didn't stop, didn't salute, just muttered 2 words under his breath as if they were classified. "Shakir Valley." She froze. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he said them, low, final, like someone nomming a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Devon stood. Her boots felt heavier than they had in months. She didn't ask who was in the valley or why. She didn't need to. The same story always repeated itself: someone's pinned, someone's dying, someone else is already writing condolences. She crossed the tarmac. Every step echoed against the hangars, a heartbeat against concrete. She felt her old body language returning, the silent confidence of a pilot walking toward her bird. The mechanic didn't look back. Smart kid. The less he knew, the safer he was. A crew chief, older with oil-blackened hands, saw her coming. His jaw tightened. He knew exactly who she was. Everyone on Bram Airfield did. "Ma'am, you're not cleared to." She didn't answer. Her hand was already on the ladder. Inside the cockpit, the air smelled of hydraulic fluid and sun-baked leather. She inhaled once, deep, like someone remembering what it meant to feel alive. Her fingers moved without thought. Master switch on, battery, APU start. Engines coughed, then roared awake, shaking dust from every seam. Somewhere behind her, alarms were already being raised. Inside the control tower, voices would be colliding, asking who authorized the startup. But authorization was a language she no longer spoke. On the far side of base, Colonel Howard would be watching satellite feeds and drone footage, calculating probabilities with the detachment of a man who had seen too many missions fail. His operations officer, Major Flores, would be arguing logic, loss rates, terrain analysis, risk factors, and every sentence would end the same: "No aircraft survives the valley." Devon adjusted her seat harness, the motions slow, deliberate. A ritual. She looked at the scratches on the dashboard, each one from a mission that should have killed her. They told her to let go of the past, but the past never left. It just circled, waiting for another target. The radio crackled to life. "Thunderbolt 42, you are not cleared for taxi. Return to Hangar 12 immediately." She ignored it. The aircraft rolled forward, heavy wheels grinding against the tarmac. "Thunderbolt 42, acknowledge." Nothing. She lined up with the runway. Wind shimmered heat through the air. mirage and reality blending into one long blur. Security is en route. Stop your aircraft now. Too late. Throttle full. The A-10 lunged forward, engine screaming, as if they too were tired of waiting. For a heartbeat, gravity hesitated, then the Warthog clawed skyward. Inside the operations center, someone shouted, "Unauthorized takeoff from Hangar 12." Colonel Howard's face went pale. Identification. Thunderbolt 42. The room froze. Every officer knew that number. Who authorized this? No one, sir, she just went. Howard's voice dropped, "Get me tower." But by the time the command reached the controller, Thunderbolt 42 was already climbing, wheels tucked in, wings leveling toward the east. Devon didn't look back. Orders, reprimands, threats, they were noise now, static behind the roar of turbines. What more could they take from her? They'd already taken the sky. The desert stretched ahead, an ocean of light and silence. 38 kilometers to Shakir Valley. She leveled at 1,800 feet, the horizon drawing a thin, unforgiving line between sand and heaven. The radio hissed again, a voice she recognized, older, rough, layered with cigarette gravel. "Crash, this is Havoc." Her hand froze on the throttle, that call sign it had been years. "Ma'am," she whispered. "Do ma'am me. You're heading into the kill zone." "Yes, ma'am." "They're saying you're not cleared, not authorized, violating every regulation in the book." "That's accurate." A pause long enough to feel like judgment, then almost softly. "You remember what I taught you about impossible missions. Fly low, trust the bird, don't think. And if you're going to do something stupid, do it fast." A brief laugh crackled through the radio. "Good hunting, Crash. Try not to make me look bad for training you." Devon smiled faintly, the first time in months. "Yes, ma'am." The line went dead. Ahead, the ridgelines began to rise, jagged teeth against the sky. She dropped to 1,500 feet, then 1,200, then 800. The Warthog trembled, stiff from months of neglect, but it flew, and that was enough. Below, dust trails, distant flashes, the sound of gunfire carried faintly through the thin air. 47 Marines pinned under rock and crossfire, their last magazines counted. The coordinates ran through her head automatically, like math she didn't need to think about. She switched radio frequencies. "Wildcat Actual, this is Crash. I'm 90 seconds out." Silence, then disbelief. "Say again." 90 seconds, keep your heads down." Another pause. A voice came back, rough, deliberate. "Crash, be advised, Canyon is hot. Multiple hostiles, RPGs confirmed, anti-aircraft dug in. 2 helicopters already aborted." "Gunny, nothing about this is safe." She could almost hear him exhale. "Just tell me where you need the hurt." "Northern Ridge, 50 meters above your position. They've got you zeroed." "Copy, going silent. Watch for the fireworks." She cut the radio. The canyon entrance yawned ahead, a slit of darkness cutting through sun-bleached stone. She could feel the valley's hunger. The stories said it devoured aircraft. She didn't care. Let it try. Her father's voice flickered through memory, the one that always returned before a fight. "Fear's just information, Devon. It tells you what matters." Her hands steadied. Thunderbolt 42 dropped below radar coverage, swallowed whole by the rock. Inside the operations center, Sergeant Ross's monitor blinked out. "Sir, we've lost contact." "She's below the ridge," Howard said quietly. "Should I keep the channel open?" "If she calls, you answer." On a drone feed, static shimmered, then black. "She's either the bravest pilot I've ever seen," Flores murmured, "or the most reckless. Maybe both." In the canyon, sunlight vanished. The world turned to shadow and stone. Walls pressed close, 80 feet, 70, 60. Devon silenced the altimeter warnings. Machines didn't understand courage. Wind buffeted the fuselage. She adjusted trim, nudged rudder. The aircraft obeyed. "Trust the bird." And the bird answered. She should have been terrified. But fear had burned out of her years ago. The day her father's jet went down in a storm, he said he could outfly. Now, as the canyon walls tightened around her, the air became heavy, alive with echoes. The A-10's engines thundered between the rocks, each vibration bouncing back at her like a pulse. "Easy," she whispered to the aircraft, the way some people whispered to God. Below her, the shadowed floor of the canyon twisted like a serpent. The terrain forced her to stay low, too low for comfort, too low for survival. Her HUD screamed numbers she ignored. Altitude 300 feet, terrain proximity warning. Ignored. The first tracer streaked past her canopy, bright, fast, and far too close. Then another, then 20. She saw muzzle flashes on the ridgeline, disciplined, coordinated, triangulated fire. Whoever was up there wasn't random militia. They were trained, waiting. Her breath slowed instead of quickened. It was always like this, right, before she became one with the machine. She adjusted throttle, dropped even lower. 200 feet, the smell of scorched air and adrenaline. The radio popped alive again. "Crash, this is Wildcat Actual, we're pinned from 3 sides. 50 meters of open ground between us and cover. We've got wounded." "Copy," she said, voice level. "Mark your smoke." A second later, orange smoke rose through the crossfire, fragile, defiant, human. "I see you," Devon said softly. She banked left, the warthog's wings slicing within 20 feet of the rock. Her target display lit up, hot signatures clustered along the northern ridge. Heavy machine guns, mortars, and something worse, 2 radar spikes, anti-aircraft emplacements. "Not today," she whispered. The trigger weighted beneath her right thumb. She lined up the shot, crosshair steady over the ridge. Then she fired. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon erupted, a mechanical thunder that drowned every other sound in existence. The aircraft shook violently, slowed by the recoil, but the devastation below was absolute. Rock disintegrated, positions vaporized. The ridge vanished under smoke and flame. Inside her helmet, she could almost hear the ghost of her instructor Monroe laughing. "If you're going to do something stupid, do it fast." Devon climbed, rolled, and came around for another pass. On the ground, Gunnery Sergeant Barnes watched the ridge collapse, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "That's Ellis," someone shouted. "Impossible," another answered. "They grounded her." "Not anymore." Barnes didn't waste time celebrating. "Reload, move, while she's got them running." Marines scrambled over shattered rocks, dragging wounded, pulling ammunition boxes. A medic, Doc Hughes, worked on a young Marine whose uniform was soaked crimson. "Stay with me, Cameron," he muttered, voice calm despite the chaos. "You're fine, kid. You're fine." The kid's lips moved. "Is that her?" Doc didn't look up. "Yeah, that's her." Above them, the A-10 roared through smoke like an angry god. Devon climbed hard, eyes sweeping the ridges. The northern threat was gone, but others still flared on the radar, east and south, crossfire zones. She rolled inverted, dove again. Tracer fire clawed at the sky. RPGs arced toward her. One passed so close she felt its wake buffet her canopy. She punched flares, bright magnesium light blinding the canyon for a heartbeat. The missile exploded behind her, shrapnel peppering her tail. Warning lights blinked red across the panel. "Hydraulics yellow," she muttered. "Fuel 71%, guns green." "Good enough." She pulled into another run. Inside the operations center at Bram, chaos had turned to disbelief. "Sir, she's in the canyon," Ross said, headset tight against his ears. Howard's eyes stayed on the feed, grainy drone footage above the valley, showing flashes of light where the A-10 disappeared and reappeared between cliffs. Hydraulic pressure's unstable, Flores murmured, reading telemetry. If she loses control. She won't, Howard interrupted quietly. Not yet. Flores glanced at him. You sound certain. I've seen her fly. Certainty is the only thing she believes in. But certainty came at a price, and Howard had seen too many good pilots spend it all in one mission. Devon's voice broke over the comms again, calm as ever. Wildcat actual, northern ridge clear, eastern slope next. Keep your men down. Copy that, Barnes replied, breathless. You're a sight for sore eyes, Crash. Don't start thanking me yet. She lined up the eastern slope, spotted an RPG team taking aim, dived, fired. The explosion sent shockwaves through the canyon. 2 down, she said, checking her gauges. Fuel at 63, hydraulics still yellow, guns still green. She exhaled, then heard it, a faint metallic ping like a coin dropped on concrete, the kind of sound every pilot hates. A heat-seeker launched. The missile tore from the southern ridge, trailing smoke and intent. Her threat receiver screamed. She didn't flinch. 1, 2, 3 flares deployed. The first 2 decoyed successfully. The third missile ignored them. Smart warhead, she hissed. She waited until the last possible second, then pulled a brutal left bank, the kind that crushed ribs and blackened vision. The missile, overshot by meters, exploded against the canyon wall. Not today, she whispered again, but her chest ached from the G-forces. She steadied her breathing. Don't tense, don't think. Above, Commander Bakshear lowered his binoculars, eyes narrowing. She's better than before, said Ibrahim, his second in command. Faster. Angrier, Faird replied. Anger makes her predictable. He'd been waiting 2 years for this moment, since the day the Americans killed his family in a mistaken strike. He studied their playbook, learned their doctrine. He knew exactly how they flew, how they thought, how they saved. And he knew Devon Ellis by reputation, the huntress, the woman who'd done the impossible once before. She'll come through the choke point, Faird said. They always do. That's where we end her. Ibrahim hesitated. If she makes it this far, sir, perhaps. Faird cut him off. She's not surviving this valley. Back in the cockpit, Devon's radar painted the terrain ahead like a wound. The canyon narrowed again, 40 feet across, her wingspan 57. Math doesn't work, she murmured. She banked right. The world tilted sideways. The aircraft flew knife-edge, skimming through the slit of rock like a blade through paper. Sparks scraped along the fuselage as her underbelly brushed stone. Inside the operations center, Ross whispered, Sir, we've lost radar contact. She's gone below line of sight, Flores said. Howard didn't move. She's not gone. Devon's breathing stayed steady, controlled. Every muscle on fire, every nerve screaming, but steady. The canyon widened again, 70 feet, then 100. She leveled off. Then came the memory, uninvited, cruel. 8 months ago, different valley, different hell. She'd flown low support for a patrol, 14 soldiers pinned in an ambush. She cleared the way, then watched as their commander ordered a retreat, leaving 3 wounded behind. They're gone anyway, he'd said. She'd heard it in his voice, the surrender, the math of command that turned human lives into acceptable losses. Devon had ignored the order, landed her A-10 in a dry riverbed under fire, loaded the 3 half-dead soldiers into the cargo bay herself. They'd lived. She'd been grounded. Now, 8 months later, the same command would probably call her reckless again. The same manuals would say she broke protocol. But she didn't care. Those soldiers had families. The ones pinned below her now did too. Crash, this is TOC, came a new voice, Lieutenant Tahiri, Afghan liaison. You are entering the narrowest section. Winds gusting 35 knots. Recommend abort. She smiled faintly. Copy, Havoc. Good luck, Captain. Luck had nothing to do with it. The canyon bent sharply left. She rolled, knife edge again. The wings cleared stone by 4 feet on either side. Sweat beaded along her temple, trickling down the scar on her shoulder. When she leveled again, the view ahead opened and the horror unfolded. 47 Marines scattered across the basin, pinned by overlapping fire from 3 sides. The ground littered with bodies, wounded and dead alike. Dust hung in the air thick as smoke. Devon's throat tightened. These weren't dots on a radar screen anymore. These were faces, uniforms, lives. Wildcat actual crash. Visual on friendlies. Prepare for cover fire. Barnes' reply was immediate. Copy that. You bring the rain, crash. She angled her nose. Guns hot. The Avenger cannon thundered again. Each burst tore the world apart. The canyon shook under the violence. The Marines cheered even, as debris rained down around them. Barnes looked up through the chaos, squinting into sunlight and dust. For the first time all day, he smiled. Told you she'd come. Doc Hughes looked up from his wounded Marine. You call that flying? No, Barnes said, that's surviving. Devon pulled up hard, metal groaning, alarm screaming. She ignored them all. Her aircraft wasn't supposed to fly this long under this much punishment, but neither was she. At Bram, Flores watched the feed, just flashes of explosions, smoke, chaos. She cleared the north and east sectors, she said. Howard didn't look away, and she'll keep going until they're out. Flores's voice dropped, or until she's dead. Howard nodded, maybe both. In the canyon, the echoes of her last burst still rolled through the stone like thunder after a storm. For a moment everything went still, no gunfire, no engines, just the sound of breathing, hers and the aircraft's, one and the same. And in that fragile silence, Devon remembered what her father once told her as a child staring at the night sky. The stars don't fall, kid. They dive. On purpose. She looked ahead into the valley's darkness, into the next impossible mile, and whispered back. Then let's dive. The canyon curved like a scar, twisting, breathing, alive. Devon's eyes flicked between the terrain and the instrument panel. Her hands moved on instinct, adjusting trim, feathering throttle. Every sound mattered now, the hum of turbines, the tremor in the stick, even the low vibration beneath her boots. The aircraft was talking to her, telling her how much time she had left before something gave out. Her radio crackled again. Crash, this is TOC, you're below radar coverage, no visual. Copy, she said, that's the idea. At 400 feet, the canyon floor blurred beneath her, rock, dust, shattered trees. Somewhere below, Marines were still alive because she was too stubborn to quit. She remembered Monroe's words from flight school, any fool can take off. The great ones come home. But coming home wasn't the point anymore. Another voice broke through, rough, familiar, uninvited. Crash, this is Hornet. Her stomach tightened. Captain Jason Mills, the one person she hadn't wanted to hear. She almost ignored it, almost. Mills, you shouldn't be on this frequency. I overrode protocol. His voice was calm, careful. Devon, you cleared a path. You did it. Now turn back before the canyon does what it always does. She didn't answer. You're flying into geometry that kills aircraft. Even you can't beat physics. Devon stared at the ridgeline ahead, jagged and narrow. Physics doesn't care about courage either. Silence, then quieter. You're not trying to prove something, are you? I'm trying to save 47 men. By killing yourself. Her jaw clenched, by finishing the mission. He exhaled, long and heavy. You can't keep doing this, Devon. Every time the world falls apart, you fly into it like you can glue it back together. Her voice hardened. Maybe that's what I was built for. She switched frequencies, cut him off. The radio hissed, then went silent. For a few seconds, only the engine spoke. In the operations center, Mills tore his headset off, anger and fear blending in his expression. She's going to die in there. Colonel Howard's gaze stayed locked on the screen. Then she'll die saving Marines. That's not strategy, that's suicide. It's also leadership. Mills stared at him. Sir, with respect. Respect noted, Howard interrupted, voice like granite. She made her choice. Now we do our jobs. Behind him, Flores crossed her arms. She'd seen this before, soldiers turning into martyrs because they believed dying was the only way to matter. She wasn't sure which was worse, the arrogance or the purity of it. Down in the valley, Gunnery Sergeant Barnes pushed another wounded Marine toward the rock wall. Blood soaked through his sleeve, not his blood yet, but close enough. He looked up at the sky and saw her. A gray shape weaving through shadow and sunlight, low and fast, cutting through tracer fire like it was rain. The sound reached him seconds later, a deep, rolling growl that made the air vibrate in his chest. That's her, he whispered. Doc Hughes looked up from another Marine's bandaged leg. I'll believe it when we're not dead. Yeah, Barnes said. But if anyone can pull us out of this hole, it's the woman they said was too reckless to fly. Reckless? Hughes asked. She's suicidal. Barnes almost smiled. Same thing sometimes. He keyed his radio. Crash, Wildcat actual. We're repositioning to cover the southern approach. You've got at least 2 RPG teams left. Copy that, she replied. Stay low. Low's all we've got left. Devon dropped another 100 feet. The canyon was twisting again, left, then right, a sharp S-turn that would break lesser pilots. Her altimeter blared warnings. She silenced it with a flick of her finger. Shut up, she muttered. Wind gusted from the north, shoving the A-10 sideways. The nose dipped. Her left wingtip scraped the canyon wall, a metallic screech like nails across heaven. The aircraft bucked. She corrected instantly. Sparks rained off the rock behind her. The whole valley flashed white with the reflection. On the ridgeline, Commander Faird watched through binoculars. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition. Maybe admiration, maybe regret. She's still alive, Ibrahim muttered. For now, Faird said, but every machine bleeds eventually, and when it does, gravity finishes the job. He lowered the binoculars, speaking more to himself than anyone. They called her the Huntress. Ibrahim looked confused. Who? The locals, after the Northern Canyon. Do you respect her? Faird's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where sunlight touched the peaks. I respect inevitability. Inside the A-10, Devon caught a flicker on her radar. Multiple returns, vehicles, maybe, or repositioned fighters. They were moving fast, converging. They're regrouping, she murmured. Her fuel gauge blinked, 59%. Her hydraulics had dropped another 5 points. She could feel it, the aircraft getting sluggish, the stick a little heavier. A pilot always knew when her bird was wounded. Her father used to tell her that an aircraft was alive, and if you listened close enough, it would tell you what hurt. She could hear it now, the faint whine behind the second engine, the way it hesitated on climbs. She'd pushed it too hard already. But she wasn't done, not while anyone down there was still breathing. Her radio crackled again. It wasn't the command frequency this time. A male voice, accented, deliberate. Captain Ellis, it said. She froze. I know you can hear me. Welcome to Shakir Valley. Identify yourself. Commander Faird Bakshir, formerly of the Afghan National Army. You trained my unit at Bram 12 years ago. Her pulse slowed, not from fear but from clarity. Then you know how this ends. I do, Faird said calmly. You die here. Not before I take your army with me. He chuckled. Such confidence. That's what your people admired, the illusion of control. You think because you can fly, you're above consequence. You built this trap for me, she realized. Yes, for you. His tone was soft, almost kind. You saved 12 Marines 2 years ago in the Northern Canyon. Do you remember? I remember. I studied that mission. Every maneuver, every deviation from protocol. I learned from you. Her throat tightened. You used my own playbook against me. I adapted it. You taught me that courage can be predicted, that you'll always come for the dying. Not courage, she said quietly, conscience. Same thing in the end, he replied. Both get people killed. The radio hissed, silence again. For a second she let herself breathe, just breathe. Then she keyed her mic. Gunny, this is Crash. Hostiles are repositioning. I'm going to clear you a way out. Prepare your wounded. Roger that, Crash, but how bad's it look? She eyed the choke point ahead. Bad enough to make a priest curse. Barnes chuckled once dry. Then good thing we brought a Marine instead. At Bram, Lieutenant Tahiri stood beside Colonel Howard, pointing at a satellite feed. Sir, the canyon narrows here south of the Marine's position. Less than 40 feet. If she enters that section, her wingspan exceeds the available space. Howard frowned. So she can't make it. She can, Tahiri said quietly, if she flies knife edge, banked 90 degrees, but no one survived that maneuver at this altitude. Flores crossed her arms. Then she's not coming back. Howard didn't answer. Devon's hands trembled slightly. She flexed her fingers, feeling the pain in her joints, adrenaline mixing with exhaustion. She thought about her father again, the smell of jet fuel on his flight jacket, the way he used to say, you don't fly to live, kid. You fly to make living worth something. She wondered what he'd think of her now, grounded, punished, defying orders again just to do what was right. Maybe he'd call her reckless. Maybe he'd call her his daughter. The canyon tightened ahead, like the throat of the earth closing. She whispered to herself, fly low, trust the bird, don't think. Her hands moved. The A-10 rolled onto its side, wings vertical, fuselage horizontal. The world turned 90 degrees. Sparks kissed her right wingtip. The HUD blinked warnings. Hold together, girl, she whispered. 30 seconds of pure silence, except for the howl of air tearing past the canopy. Then she burst through the other side, the canyon widening again, sunlight flooding in. Her breath came out shaky, half laugh, half sob. Told you we could make it. The aircraft didn't answer, but it kept flying. Below, Barnes and his Marines watched the ridges crumble one by one, gunfire fatting. Hope, small, fragile, dangerous, began to crawl back into their chests. Crash, Barnes called, voice thick. We've got movement near the southern exit. Looks like they're retreating. Negative, Devon said instantly. They're repositioning, the fight's not over. How do you know? Because it never is. High on the northern ridge, Faird watched her glide through the canyon's narrowest gap, a feat he designed to be impossible. Ibrahim lowered his binoculars, awe on his face. She made it. Faird's eyes stayed on the horizon. Good, let her think she's winning. He keyed his radio, switching to his ground network. All teams fall back to secondary positions. Let her pass. When she circles for the Marines' extraction, we kill her there. He smiled faintly. She'll never see it coming. In the cockpit, Devon felt it, the strange, uneasy quiet that only came before an ambush. The gunfire had stopped too suddenly. The canyon was too still. She checked her instruments again, fuel 56%, hydraulics dropping faster now. She had maybe 40 minutes of flight time left, maybe less. She keyed the mic. Wildcat actual, Crash. How mobile are your wounded? Slow, Barnes replied. Too critical to move far. Extraction birds are standing by 20 clicks out, but I need to clear your exit first. Crash, you've done enough, pull out. There's no other way, Gunny. A long pause. Finally, Barnes said quietly, how bad is it ahead? Bad enough that you'll owe me a drink if we live. He almost laughed, copy that. She smiled, faint but real. Her radio hissed again, the same voice as before, Faird. Captain Ellis. She ignored it. You're flying into a graveyard, built by your own doctrine. She said nothing. I want you to understand something, he continued. You don't belong to your country anymore. You belong to your guilt, and that makes you predictable. Her jaw tightened. You talk too much. Maybe, but in this canyon, words last longer than aircraft. She cut the frequency again. The silence that followed was louder than his voice. Back at Bram, Flores leaned against the console, watching the feed of static and flickering thermal images. She's alone out there, she said softly. Howard didn't look up. No, she's got 47 reasons not to quit. Flores studied him, and if she doesn't come back. He sighed. Then I tell Washington we just lost the best damn pilot we ever had. In the canyon, Devon descended again, the sky narrowing above her. Her knuckles white on the stick, her heart steady, her purpose absolute. Below, 47 men held their breath, trusting the sound of a single engine echoing through stone, a sound that meant they weren't abandoned yet. And as the sun broke over the ridgeline, turning dust into gold, Devon whispered to the valley itself. You can have the sky, but not them. The valley changed its sound. That was the first warning. It wasn't the roar of engines or the stutter of gunfire anymore. It was something quieter, heavier, the kind of silence that carried intention. Devon's instincts tightened before her mind caught up. Something was waiting. She scanned the ridges, nothing. Thermal sensors, blank. Radar, empty. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Too clean, too still. They've gone dark, she whispered. They're setting the table. She had seen this kind of calm before in another country, another war, just before an ambush detonated and the air filled with metal. Her father used to say, you can tell when death's about to start talking. The world goes polite first. She swallowed hard. Copy that, Dad. Fuel 52%, hydraulics red. She should have turned back hours ago. But she wasn't built for retreat. Down below, Barnes crouched beside the wounded, checking pulses, counting breaths, pretending the silence wasn't choking him. Doc, he muttered, why's it so damn quiet? Hughes didn't look up. Maybe they finally got scared. Or smart. He glanced up at the sky, at that gray silhouette circling above them like a hawk with one broken wing. Crash Wildcat actual, he radioed. You've got my men's gratitude, but we've got movement again. Dust clouds South Ridge. Devon's eyes snapped to the horizon. There, faint rising plumes, coordinated vehicle movement. They're regrouping for a final push, she said. Stay low, keep your position tight. What about you? She smiled faintly, though no one could see it. I'll keep the sky angry. In the operations center, tension rippled like static. Flores's voice broke the silence. We've lost the drone feed again. Ross adjusted his console. Trying to reacquire, ma'am. Signals jammed. By who? Not sure. Could be external interference. Howard turned, expression unreadable. Or intentional. Flores met his eyes. You think he's baiting her? She's the target, always was. Howard's voice softened, almost as if he didn't want anyone to hear it. She's not flying a mission. She's flying a confession. Devon leveled the aircraft, eyes narrowing on the southern ridge. Movement faint, deliberate, too synchronized for militia. She flipped her safety covers open. Let's dance. The A-10 screamed into a dive, nose down, engines roaring. The ground rushed up fast, too fast. Dust whipped against the canopy. She saw them then, armored trucks, mounted guns, and a cluster of fighters hauling what looked like a metal crate. Her brain processed it in fragments. Crate cables, power source. It hit her a second too late. IMP. She pulled hard on the stick, but the detonation flashed like a sun tearing through rock. The aircraft jolted violently. Lights blinked out. Systems died. Every gauge went dark except the old analog altimeter. Her stomach lurched. The sound of her own heartbeat filled the cockpit. "Come on, girl, not like this." The aircraft pitched downward. Warning tones flickered, faded, returned in distorted bursts. She slammed the manual overrides, rerouting power through backup circuits. The HUD flickered back, half-dead, numbers scrambled. "Crash, talk to me." Barnes' voice came through the static. "Still here," she said through gritted teeth. "They hit me with a pulse, instruments fried, flying blind." "Can you stay up?" "Define up." She forced the A-10 to level. The controls were heavy now, unresponsive, like trying to move stone through air. The bird groaned, but she held it steady. Commander Faird watched from the ridge, binoculars steady. The pulse charge had detonated perfectly. "She's crippled," Ibrahim said, awe and relief mixing in his tone. "Not yet," Faird murmured. "The huntress dies slowly." He'd studied her enough to know she'd keep flying even when her wings gave out. That was what he admired and despised most about her kind. "She'll try to finish the mission," he said. "That's when we strike." Devon's breathing slowed, controlled. Focus, not panic. That's what separated pilots from ghosts. Her mind moved through possibilities, primary systems compromised, visual navigation only, hydraulics failing, limited gun control. She could turn back now, eject, maybe survive. But the Marines below wouldn't. She looked down through the canopy. Tiny shapes half hidden in the dust. Men she'd never met, trusting her to be more than the sum of her damage. She pressed the comm. "Wildcat Actual, this is Crash. How's your position?" "Still pinned. If you can hit the south ridge, we can push west. I'll give you 30 seconds of clear air. Use them." Barnes exhaled. "Roger that." Devon rolled into another dive. No instruments, no guidance, just instinct. The A-10 was a wounded beast now, shaking, snarling, defiant. Her eyes locked on the ridge. She could see muzzle flashes, silhouettes shifting. She fired. The GAU-8 rattled the air, smoke trailing from the barrels. Rounds hit the ridge, tearing into the stone, scattering fighters. She couldn't see her impacts clearly through the haze, but the sound told her enough. Short bursts of silence between impacts meant destruction. "Crash, this is Wildcat. We're moving." She smiled faintly. "Go." But Faird had planned for that. "Now," he said. Hidden beneath a tarp near the canyon's western bend, 3 mobile AA launchers came alive. Radar blinked red. Targets locked. "Fire." 3 missiles streaked upward, twisting through the smoke like serpents. Devon saw the trails before her sensors did. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." She pulled hard. The aircraft strained, the right wing screaming in protest. The first missile missed by meters. The second detonated behind her tail, shrapnel shredded the fuselage, alarms blaring. The third. Impact. The explosion tore through the right engine. Fire engulfed the wingtip. Her world turned red. The A-10 spun, disoriented, tumbling toward the canyon floor. Her mind went white, pure reflex. Stick left, rudder opposite, throttle cut, nose forward. The spin slowed barely. The ground rushed up. She pulled with everything she had left. The bird leveled at 30 feet above the canyon floor, flames licking the right engine. "Crash report." Her voice was hoarse, still in it. "Jesus," Barnes whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Smoke poured behind her like a comet tail. Every warning light glowed red. Her aircraft was dying, but not fast enough to stop her. Inside the operations center, Howard stood frozen, eyes locked on the satellite map. "Telemetry's gone," Ross said. "All we're getting is partial signal from the transponder." "She's hit," Flora said softly. "Not down," Howard replied. "Not yet." Tahiri crossed himself under his breath. "She's flying on faith." Howard nodded. and rage. Devon glanced at her reflection in the cracked canopy, soot across her cheeks, blood trickling from a cut near her temple. "Not today," she whispered again. The fire warning kept flashing. She ignored it. Her hands hurt from gripping the controls, but she couldn't let go, not until the last Marine was out. Below, the convoy was moving. Marines hauling stretchers, weapons slung, sprinting through the dust. "Crash, we're clear of the southern ridge," Barnes shouted. "Extraction zone secured. Where the hell are you?" "Right above your guardian angel's pay grade." "You're hit, aren't you?" "Little scratch." "Crash." "Go Gunny, get them out." He hesitated. "You're not planning on." She cut the radio. There wasn't time for goodbye. Faird watched her burning aircraft circle above the canyon. "She's staying," Ibrahim said quietly. "She's trying to cover their retreat." Faird exhaled slowly. "That's the difference between us. She believes dying is the same as winning." He turned to his spotter. "Line up the last launcher." Devon's altimeter read 200 feet. Her right engine flamed out completely. The left sputtered. She could still steer barely. The ridge ahead shimmered through the heat. Then she saw it, the glint of metal. A launcher locked on her. Her breath steadied. No flares left, no countermeasures, no chance. But she had one thing left: direction. "All right, girl," she whispered. "One last run." She banked toward the ridge, nose down. The engine groaned. "Crash, this is Wildcat. We're loaded. We're leaving. Where are you?" "Keep flying, Gunny. Don't look back." "What are you doing?" "Ending a conversation." Her father's voice whispered through memory again. "You don't run from storms, Devon. You steer into them." She smiled. "Copy that." Throttle forward, wings steady. The ridge rushed closer, faster, brighter, louder. Faird realized too late what she was doing. "She's coming straight for us." The A-10 hit the ridge at full speed. For a moment, the canyon became daylight. Then silence. A shockwave rolled through the valley, dust swallowing the world whole. Minutes later, Barnes and his men climbed aboard the evacuation helicopters. The ground shook beneath them. "Crash, come in," Barnes called into the radio. Static answered. He tried again. "Crash, do you copy?" "Nothing." The pilot shouted, "We need to move, Gunny." Barnes hesitated, staring back at the wall of smoke. "She bought us 30 seconds, he said quietly. "That's all she ever asked for." The helicopter lifted off, rotors slicing through the haze. Below, the canyon burned. At Bram Airfield, silence filled the control room. "Impact confirmed," Ross said, voice hollow. Telemetry ceased. Howard didn't speak. He just stared at the coordinates glowing red on the map. Flores whispered, "God help her." Howard's jaw tightened. She didn't need help, she was help. Hours later, when the smoke cleared, satellite imagery showed something strange. The wreckage of the A-10 wedged deep into the ridge, its wings twisted, the fuselage broken but intact. Flores leaned closer. "Wait, is that?" Howard's eyes narrowed. "Zoom in." There, just beside the shattered cockpit canopy, a faint emergency beacon pulsed red. One flash. Then another. Then another. When the sky finally stopped burning, silence returned to Shakir Valley. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence that follows sacrifice. The kind that leaves no sound because everything that could be said already had been. For 2 hours, smoke clung to the ridgelines. Flames danced where the A-10 had struck, tiny orange ghosts fading one by one. Wind carried the last pieces of her, shards of metal, fragments of paint, and the echo of her final dive. In the distance, the rescue helicopters disappeared into the western haze, carrying 47 Marines who would live to see another dawn. But the woman who had bought them that dawn was gone. Or so everyone thought. Colonel Howard stood inside the operations room, the fluorescent lights flickering over exhausted faces. "Impact confirmed," Sergeant Ross said again, like repetition could make it easier to believe. Telemetry ceased at 0942, no further transmission. Howard's hands rested on the table edge. The maps, the feeds, the numbers, none of it felt real anymore. He wasn't looking at coordinates, he was looking at a tomb. Major Flores leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her tone quiet but unflinching. "She disobeyed every order in the book, sir, took off unauthorized, engaged without clearance, risked an international incident." Howard nodded once, and saved 47 men we'd already written off. Flores hesitated. "It doesn't change the fact." "It changes everything," he interrupted. His voice cracked slightly, the edge between command and grief blurring. "It changes what courage looks like." No one spoke after that. On the far monitor, the static feed flickered again, a satellite pass sweeping over Shakir Valley. At first just smoke, then a faint red flash. Blink. Pause. Blink. Ross leaned forward. "Sir, beacon detected, same grid as the impact zone." Howard froze. "What kind of beacon?" "Emergency locator. Analog frequency, old military code. Outdated but functional." "From the A-10. "Possibly. It's weak, could be interference, but it's pulsing every 10 seconds. Howard's heart kicked once in his chest. "Get me a drone overhead, now." Half a world away, inside a medical tent near Kandahar, Gunnery Sergeant Barnes lay on a cot, one arm in a sling, IV line running into his wrist. He stared at the canvas ceiling, mind still caught between gunfire and rotor blades. Doc Hughes approached, fatigue written in every movement. "You're supposed to be resting." "Rest is for people who deserve it," Barnes muttered. Hughes sat on the cot opposite him. "You're alive, that counts." Barnes turned his head slowly. "She's not." Neither man spoke for a long moment. The air hummed with the distant rumble of generators and the faint echo of helicopters coming and going. Finally Hughes said, "They're saying command, calling it a mission compromise." Barnes laughed once hollow. "That's what they call a miracle when it doesn't fit the paperwork." Hughes looked down. "You think she knew?" "That she wasn't coming back?" "Yeah." Barnes exhaled through his teeth. "She knew before she took off." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a scorched piece of metal, a sliver of gray paint with half a letter on it. "THU from Thunderbolt 42. He turned it over in his hand. "She didn't care what they thought, she just cared that we made it out." Hughes studied the fragment. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who's already died once," Barnes said softly. At Bram Airfield, the drone feed returned. The image wavered, glitching through interference. Howard leaned close to the screen. "Zoom in." A black scar cut across the ridge, the A-10's fuselage half buried in rock and sand. Its wings were twisted backward, one engine gone, the other blackened. The cockpit canopy was shattered. And there, just inside the debris field, that same red light, pulsing steady as a heartbeat. "Sir," Ross whispered, "that's not a malfunction, that's manual activation." Flores straightened. "You're saying someone turned it on after impact?" Ross swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." Howard's voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. "She's alive." The rescue order went out within minutes. But the valley wasn't kind to second chances. Wind had changed direction, sweeping smoke into every crevice. Rockslides from the explosion had blocked the main approach. Even drones struggled to hold position in the turbulence. Tahiri, now in charge of coordinating the recovery team, frowned at the screen. "We can't land near the ridge. It's too unstable." Howard didn't hesitate. "Then we send in ground units." "Sir, we don't know who else might still be out there. Bakshire's men could be regrouping." Howard looked at him. "Then they'll have company." Somewhere beneath the twisted remains of her aircraft, Devon Ellis opened her eyes. Darkness. Dust. A high ringing in her ears that drowned out thought. For a few seconds she couldn't tell if she was dead or dreaming. The air tasted of metal and smoke. Her body refused to move. She tried to breathe, a sharp pain tore through her ribs. Broken, maybe too. Her left arm wouldn't respond. Her right hand found the emergency panel by instinct. The glass was shattered, the lever jammed. She pressed it anyway. The old analog beacon blinked to life, a faint red glow amid ruin. "Still here," she whispered. Her voice barely existed. The heat pressed around her like a living thing. She tried to unbuckle, but the harness had locked under tension. Each tug sent pain knifing through her shoulder. Finally the strap snapped. She collapsed forward, gasping. Through the cracked canopy, she could see sunlight breaking through dust, pale, golden, almost holy. Outside, the valley was quiet again, too quiet. She crawled toward the opening, dragging herself through shards of metal. Every movement scraped bone against pain. Halfway out, she stopped. Footsteps. Not American, not rescue. Soft, deliberate, coming closer. She froze. Then a shadow. Commander Faird Backshire moved carefully through the smoke, one arm bandaged, face streaked with ash. The blast had thrown him against the rock, but he'd lived. Of course he had. Men like him always did. He saw the wreckage before he saw her. The A-10, scorched but intact enough to recognize. He stopped 10 meters away, rifle raised. "Captain Ellis," he called softly, "I told you the valley keeps what it's owed." Devon didn't move. She was half hidden under a piece of the wing, blood masking her face. "Funny thing about valleys," she whispered, "they don't know when to quit." Faird stepped closer. "You fought well, I give you that, better than most men I've faced." "Flattery," she rasped, "from a murderer." He tilted his head. "From a soldier, we're both murderers. Only difference is who writes the history." He circled her slowly, studying the damage to her and the aircraft. "Your people will come for you, and when they do, this valley will take them too." Devon's hand moved slightly, slipping beneath her leg, fingers brushing the sidearm still holstered there. Faird noticed but didn't react. "Do you think dying here changes anything?" She looked up at him, eyes burning despite the blood. "No, but living through it might." Her hand shot out, pulling the pistol free. Faird fired first. The bullet grazed her shoulder. Her shot caught him in the side, spinning him back into the smoke. He fell, dropping his weapon. Devon crawled toward him, every breath a knife. By the time she reached his body, he was still breathing barely. "Why?" he whispered. "Why keep fighting?" She stared at him, voice shaking. "Because someone has to." He tried to speak again, but no words came. His eyes clouded, unfocused, then still. The wind shifted. Dust rolled through the wreckage, covering him slowly. Devon looked up at the sky, a narrow strip of blue between stone and smoke. "Crash to command," she whispered, voice faint but steady. "If anyone's still on this channel, I'm alive." Static answered. Then a voice she didn't expect. "Crash, this is Colonel Howard. We've got your beacon, hold position." She almost laughed, no plans to dance. Howard's tone softened, the first warmth he'd shown all day. "You did it, Ellis. You brought them home." She looked around at the wreckage, the body, the broken world. "At a cost." There was a long pause. Howard finally said, "The right costs are never cheap." Hours later, the recovery team reached the ridge. They found her leaning against the half-buried cockpit, bloodied but alive, her hand still resting on the aircraft's skin like she was afraid to let it go. When they tried to lift her, she whispered something no one quite caught, maybe a name, maybe a prayer. As they carried her toward the waiting chopper, the wind picked up again, whistling through the wreckage like applause. Barnes got the news that evening. He sat up in bed, so fast his IV line tore loose. She's alive. Hughes nodded. Medevac just confirmed, critical but stable. For the first time since the firefight, Barnes smiled, small, broken, disbelieving. Hell, he muttered. She actually did it. Hughes grinned faintly. Guess angels don't need wings after all. Barnes shook his head. No, they just need the guts to fly through hell. At Braham, Colonel Howard watched the helicopter touch down on the tarmac. Medics rushed forward, unloading the stretcher. Through the blur of motion, he saw her, oxygen mask, IVs, bandages, eyes barely open but still fierce. She turned her head slightly as they wheeled her past. "Colonel," she rasped through the mask. He leaned close. "Rest, Captain, you're home." Her lips curved in a faint, tired smile. "Home's wherever they need me next." Then she closed her eyes. The medics carried her inside. Howard stood there long after the doors closed. He looked toward the fatting horizon, the same direction she had flown, and whispered, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The first thing she felt was the sound. Not the hum of machines or the footsteps of nurses, the sound of her own heartbeat. Slow, uneven, alive. Devon opened her eyes to sterile white light. The ceiling was too bright, too clean, too far from the desert she remembered dying in. A hospital. Her mouth was dry, her throat raw. She tried to move, but a dull, familiar pain anchored her to the bed. Her right shoulder was bandaged tight. Tubes trailed from her arm. Monitors blinked beside her, whispering that she was still here. For a long time, she just breathed. Each inhale felt like an apology she hadn't learned how to make. The door opened quietly. A figure stepped in. Colonel Howard. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, hat in hand, as if words were too small for what he needed to carry. Finally, he spoke. "You scared the hell out of everyone, Captain." Her voice came out rough, dry. "Wouldn't be the first time." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You know how many pilots I've seen go into that valley and never come out. Enough to tell me I was stupid. Enough to tell me you were brave." She looked away, jaw tightening. "Doesn't feel brave, feels heavy." Howard moved closer, setting his cap on the side table. 47 Marines are alive because you didn't wait for permission. That weight you're feeling, it's called consequence. Heroes carry it." "Heroes?" she repeated softly. "They grounded me for that word last time." Howard sighed. "They'll probably do it again." Her eyes flicked toward him, tired, searching. "What are they saying?" "That you saved lives by breaking the law. That you defied a direct order, compromised air command structure, and risked escalation in a restricted zone." In English. He looked at her, steady, quiet. "They don't know whether to give you a medal or a court-martial." She let out a shaky breath. "Story of my life." Days passed. The world outside her window moved in sunlight and silence. Inside, time slowed to the rhythm of her recovery. Her body healed faster than her thoughts. Every night she dreamed of the dive, the roar, the heat, the split second between purpose and oblivion. She woke with her hands clenched, still gripping phantom controls. The doctors called it trauma. She called it memory, refusing to let her go. Barnes visited 3 days later, his arm still in a sling, uniform wrinkled, eyes tired but alive. When he walked in, she almost didn't recognize him without dust and blood. "Permission to look like hell, ma'am," he said. She smiled, the first real smile since she woke up. "Granted, Gunny." He sat beside her bed, quiet at first. The silence between soldiers who don't need words to know what the other's seen. Finally he said, "You saved us." She shook her head slowly. "You saved each other." He reached into his pocket and placed something on her tray. The small, scorched piece of metal with THU still visible. "Found it near your crash site," he said. "Figured you might want it back." She stared at it, thumb brushing the charred edge. "Thunderbolt 42. Damn bird refused to die, Barnes said. Devon swallowed hard. So did I. He looked at her then, really looked. The kind of look that sees past rank and rumor, past what the world writes about people like her. I heard they're trying to decide what to do with you, he said. They'll make an example of me, she replied. Either way. Maybe they should. She raised an eyebrow. You always this honest to officers. He smiled faintly. Only the ones who make me proud. She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, slow, grateful, unsure. As he stood to leave, he paused by the door. You know, we were counting seconds down there. Figured we had maybe 30 left before it was over. 30. Yeah, that's what you gave us. He hesitated, then added softly, I guess sometimes 30 seconds is forever. And then he was gone. That night Devon couldn't sleep. The words kept replaying, 30 seconds is forever. She stared out the window. The Afghan desert stretched endless under the moonlight, the same horizon she'd nearly vanished into. For the first time, she asked herself what came after surviving. The military had always told her who she was, a pilot, a soldier, a weapon. But now, in the quiet, she wasn't sure she wanted to be any of those things anymore. She turned her head, eyes falling on the metal fragment beside her bed. It caught the moonlight, dull but steady. She remembered her father's voice again. You don't fly because they tell you to, Devon. You fly because you can't stand to crawl. She smiled faintly. Guess I took that too literally. Morning came with orders. A formal inquiry. A debrief. An official silence that always meant politics had arrived. 2 officers came to escort her, a colonel and a legal rep from command. Their uniforms were perfect, their expressions weren't. Captain Ellis, the colonel said, you are to appear before the review board at 0900. You'll have a chance to present your statement regarding the unauthorized sortie. She nodded slowly, understood. The legal rep, a young major with eyes too clean for war, added softly, for what it's worth, ma'am, my brother was one of the Marines you pulled out of that canyon. Devon met his gaze. Neither of them said what they were thinking. The hearing was held in a quiet conference room at Bram, the kind with too much air conditioning and not enough humanity. 3 officers behind a desk. A flag. A silence that felt rehearsed. Howard sat off to the side, not part of the panel but watching, protective, unreadable. The presiding officer adjusted his glasses. Captain Devon Ellis, you are here regarding the events of October 14th, involving the unauthorized deployment of aircraft Thunderbolt 42. Yes, sir. You acknowledge taking off without clearance, engaging hostile forces, and directly disobeying standing orders. Yes, sir. You are aware such actions constitute a violation of the UCMJ and can result in dismissal or imprisonment. Yes, sir. Then why? The question hung in the air, not procedural, not rhetorical. Real human. Devon looked down at her hands, the bandages, the scars, the faint tremor that still refused to leave. Because they were dying, she said softly, and nobody was coming. The room stayed silent. I've seen what happens when we wait for permission, she continued. I've seen men die because someone needed a form signed first. She looked up at them now, eyes clear, voice steady. I didn't fly for approval. I flew because 47 lives were hanging in the air, and I had wings. For a moment, no one spoke. Howard's jaw tightened, proud, quiet, grieving all at once. Finally, the presiding officer leaned back. You realize this board will have to deliberate. I didn't come for a verdict, Devon said. I came for truth. He frowned slightly. And what truth is that, Captain? She met his eyes. That doing the right thing doesn't always mean following the right orders. The deliberation lasted less than an hour. When the board reconvened, The tone in the room had shifted, softer, uncertain, human again. "Captain Ellis," the presiding officer said, "in light of your actions resulting in the survival of 47 Marines, this board recommends your record remain classified pending further review. You are to remain grounded until further notice." Grounded again. But this time she didn't fight it. She just nodded, understood. Howard met her outside the room. For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, "You told them the truth." "I told them my truth," she corrected. "Theirs comes with footnotes." He smiled faintly. "You still think you did the wrong thing." "I think I did the necessary thing." Howard looked out the window, the same horizon she once vanished into. "That's what makes it right." Weeks later, when her body finally healed enough to move freely, Devon walked across the airfield alone. Thunderbolt 42's wreckage had been recovered and laid out in sections, twisted metal glinting under sunlight, a monument to defiance. She ran her fingers along one of the bent panels, tracing the scars like a map. A young mechanic nearby said quietly, "They're melting her down, ma'am, for parts." Devon nodded, "Good." The mechanic looked confused, "Good." She smiled softly. "Means she'll keep flying in pieces of something new." He didn't understand. He didn't need to. She turned toward the horizon again. The wind carried the faint scent of jet fuel and heat, the same perfume that had raised her, broken her, and brought her back. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the itch to fly. She just felt still. And in that stillness, she realized something her father never told her. That sometimes, surviving isn't about rising above the storm. It's about learning to stand in its silence and call it peace. The war didn't end when she came home. It just changed its shape. Gone were the roar of engines, the weight of flight suits, the ritual of briefings. In their place, silence, empty mornings, and a bed that didn't rock with turbulence or heartbeat. Captain Devon Ellis sat alone in her small quarters on Bram Airfield, staring at the folder the board had given her. "Medical leave," it said, "pending evaluation." A polite way to say, "We don't know what to do with you anymore." She closed it. The paper didn't matter. The silence did. She'd spent years defining herself by sound, the growl of turbines, the rhythm of machine guns, the hum of her aircraft beneath her feet. Now all she had were heartbeats and questions. Who was she without the sky? And who was the sky without her? Outside, the world carried on pretending nothing had changed. Cadets trained on the tarmac. New pilots ran drills, and somewhere, another mission briefing began. But whenever they saw her pass, the woman who had broken orders and still come home, they went silent. Respectful, awkward. As if she were both legend and warning at once. One of them, a young lieutenant, finally approached her near the hangar one morning. "Ma'am," he asked hesitantly. She looked up from her coffee. "Yeah. Is it true, you flew the canyon run without nav or radar?" She studied him, so young, so unscarred, so certain the world could be mastered by courage alone. "Yeah," she said softly, "and it nearly killed me." His eyes widened, full of admiration. Still, it was incredible. She smiled faintly. "Then do me a favor." "Anything, ma'am." "Don't try to be incredible. Try to come home." He blinked, unsure how to answer, then nodded awkwardly and walked away. Devon watched him go, a ghost of who she once was. Later that day, she visited the recovery hangar. Thunderbolt 42 had been reduced to fragments now, wings in one corner, tail in another. Mechanics stripped her down piece by piece, cataloging each scar for study. Devon stood beside what was left of the cockpit. She ran her fingertips along the jagged edge of the canopy. It was cool to the touch, indifferent, like all machines. "You were stubborn to the end," she whispered. "Guess we had that in common." The mechanic beside her cleared his throat softly. We're salvaging the left engine for training models, ma'am. She nodded. Good, let her teach. He paused. If you don't mind me asking, ma'am, what was it like, knowing you weren't coming back? She looked at him, not unkindly, but with a sadness that spoke of miles and ghosts. It wasn't knowing, she said quietly. It was deciding it didn't matter. The mechanic didn't ask again. 2 weeks later, she was cleared for limited duty, non-flight assignments only. Paperwork, logistics, simulators. They called it rehabilitation. She called it purgatory with paperwork. Howard visited once during those weeks. He brought no flowers, no speeches, just coffee and silence, the kind shared between people who have both seen the edge of something no one else can describe. You ever miss it? She asked him, eyes on the hangar beyond the window. Every damn day. And you stopped flying anyway. He shrugged. Command needed someone who remembered what the sky costs. She smirked. You make a good priest, sir. Don't curse me like that. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds more like exhaling ghosts. Then his tone softened. You know the Marines sent a letter. She looked at him. What kind of letter? A real one, paper, ink, signed by all 47 of them. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. They asked me to give you this. Devon stared at it for a long moment before taking it. Her hands trembled slightly. When she finally opened it, the first line made her stop breathing. To the woman who gave us back the sunrise. She didn't read further. She couldn't yet. Her eyes blurred before her mind could finish the words. Howard said nothing. He didn't need to. That night, she finally left her quarters and walked out to the far edge of the airfield. The desert stretched endless, painted in moonlight and memory. She sat on the hood of an old maintenance truck, watching the lights of departing aircraft blink against the horizon. She could almost feel the engines in her bones again, distant, familiar. For a moment, she imagined climbing back into that cockpit. The weight of the helmet. The burn of the throttle. The sky waiting, patient and cruel. But the moment passed. Because she knew now that the sky didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to those still learning how to touch it. And maybe that was enough. 2 days later, Command issued their decision. The official report read like a contradiction. Captain Devon Ellis is hereby recognized for extraordinary valor and tactical initiative under hostile conditions. The next paragraph added, pending further evaluation, Captain Ellis is relieved from active flight status indefinitely. Award and punishment. Honor and exile. All in the same sentence. She laughed when she read it, not out of humor, but out of recognition. That was the military she'd given her life to, a place that could turn a miracle into a memo. Howard found her later, sitting outside the briefing hall, staring at the citation. They couldn't decide, he said softly. They never can, she replied. He looked down at her. You could appeal it. She shook her head. No, let them keep their balance. The sky's big enough for their conscience too. Weeks blurred into months. The nightmares came less often, the ache in her shoulder eased, but the emptiness didn't. She started teaching at the flight school, not by assignment, but by quiet request. The new pilots needed instructors who understood more than airspeed and angles. On her first day, she stood before a room of cadets, most of them half her age. She didn't give them the usual speech about discipline or honor. She just said, every aircraft you fly has a soul, treat it with respect. And when you hear fear whisper in your head, listen. It's not weakness, it's information. They wrote it down like scripture. One cadet raised a hand. Ma'am, what's the hardest part of being a pilot? She thought for a moment. Coming back down, she said. The room fell silent. Later that evening, she returned to the hangar again. The sun was setting. gold light spilling across the broken metal of Thunderbolt 42. A quiet shadow moved behind her. Barnes. He was out of uniform now, in civilian clothes, his sling gone but his posture still carrying the stiffness of survival. "Didn't think you'd still be here," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever leave," she answered. He joined her by the wreckage, hands in pockets. "They offered me discharge papers. I turned them down." "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because if I walk away, I stop remembering why you didn't." She nodded slowly. "What'll you do instead?" "Train new guys, keep them alive." "Good," she said. "That's a better kind of fight." They stood there a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that no camera could ever capture, the kind of sky only pilots truly understand. Barnes broke the silence first. "They're calling it the Shakir incident. It's already in the training manuals." Devon almost laughed. "Figures. They'll study it, quote it, maybe even romanticize it, but they'll never really know what it smelled like." "What it smelled like?" "Fear," she said softly. "Burnt metal and fear. That's what courage always smells like." As the last light faded, Barnes asked quietly, "So what now, Crash?" She looked at the horizon. The air shimmered. The night was coming, calm and vast. "Now," she said, "now I teach others how not to make my mistakes." "And what about you?" "I already learned what I needed to." He frowned slightly. "And what's that?" She turned to him, her face soft under the amber light. "That sometimes, saving people doesn't mean you get to save yourself." He didn't argue. He just nodded, slow, respectful. As he walked away, she whispered after him, "Not for him but for the wind to carry." And maybe that's okay. That night, long after the base lights dimmed, Devon sat alone by the window. The stars stretched infinite above her, each one a silent reminder of everything she'd lost and everything she'd found. She reached for the letter again, the one from the Marines. This time she read it all. "You didn't just save our lives. You reminded us what life is for. You made us believe that courage still exists in a world too tired to remember it. We'll never forget the sound of your engines, because when everything else went silent, that sound meant hope." She folded the letter, pressed it against her chest, and closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she slept without dreaming of the crash. Because some stories don't end with falling. They end with learning how to stay grounded and still rise. It had been 6 months since Shakir Valley. 6 months since the world stopped calling her reckless and started calling her something worse, a symbol. Symbols are heavy things. They don't get to rest. They get polished, displayed, and misunderstood. Captain Devon Ellis had never wanted to be remembered. She just hadn't wanted 47 names written on a wall. But now, wherever she went, the whispers followed. "That's her. The Warthog pilot. The woman who flew the canyon." She smiled politely, nodded when protocol required, but inside she felt the same question circling endlessly: what now? Because surviving isn't the same as living. And heroism, she'd learned, is often just another word for loneliness. Winter came early that year. The wind off the desert carried a cold edge that smelled of rust and rain. Devon spent her days teaching at the airfield, instructing cadets on emergency procedures, ethics, and what she called the quiet parts of courage. The students loved her stories, though they didn't realize they weren't really stories. They were warnings wrapped in memory. Sometimes she'd pause mid-lecture, stare out the window at the runways shimmering in heat, and her mind would drift back to that canyon, to the hum of her engines, the taste of dust, the feeling of gravity pulling at her ribs as the world tilted sideways. And she'd think, "I miss her." Not herself, her, the aircraft. Thunderbolt 42. She used to believe pilots and planes were separate things. Now she knew better. You didn't just fly a machine, you shared a heartbeat with it. One evening, as she locked up the simulator bay, she noticed a young woman sitting alone outside the hangar, a new recruit, maybe 19. Her name tag read Holt. "Everything all right, Lieutenant?" Devon asked. The girl startled, standing quickly. "Yes, ma'am, just thinking." Devon tilted her head. "Thinking's dangerous in this line of work." The girl hesitated. "Can I ask you something, ma'am?" "Sure." "What did it feel like?" Devon frowned slightly. What feel like?" "Flying into the valley, knowing everyone said you couldn't make it out." Devon studied her for a moment, young, curious, unscarred. The kind of person the world hadn't betrayed yet. "It felt," she said slowly, "like being the only heartbeat left in the world. Everything else disappears, fear, orders, logic. You just become the moment, and the moment decides if it keeps you." The young pilot nodded, wide-eyed. "Would you do it again?" Devon looked away toward the horizon. The sun was setting, gold bleeding into gray. "Yes," she said softly, "but I'd try to come back slower." Holt smiled, uncertain whether to laugh or salute. Devon smiled back. "Go on, Lieutenant, the sky's waiting." When the girl walked away, Devon felt something shift inside her, not pride, not regret, something smaller, something like acceptance. That night she walked back to Hangar 12. The doors creaked open, the same doors she'd rolled through on that unauthorized takeoff months ago. Inside, a new A-10 sat under floodlights, sleek, polished, waiting. Her replacement. She approached it slowly, hand brushing against the cool metal. Different aircraft, same soul. A small placard on the side caught her eye. Thunderbolt 43, in honor of Captain Devon Crash Ellis. She froze. Someone had painted it there quietly, unofficially. A mechanic's tribute, maybe. She traced the number 3 with her finger, a single tear cutting through the dust on her cheek. "Guess she left the sky to you," she whispered. Outside, footsteps approached Colonel Howard. Still in uniform, though the lines on his face had deepened. "Didn't think you'd find out yet," he said softly. "The brass will probably remove that paint by morning." She smiled. "Then it'll mean even more." He stepped beside her, looking up at the aircraft. "Command's been talking." "That's never good," she said. "This time maybe it is. They're reinstating your flight clearance." Devon blinked. "You're serious?" "Conditionally. Observation flights only, training sorties. They still don't trust you with live combat." She almost laughed. "After what happened, I don't trust me with live combat either." Howard smirked. "That's what makes you ready again." For a moment neither spoke. The hangar hummed with faint electrical buzz, the air thick with unspoken gratitude and ghosts. Finally Devon said, "You think I should take it?" Howard turned to her. "You already did, the second you walked in here." The next morning, the base came alive before dawn. Engines warming, crews moving, the horizon blushing with first light. Devon stood on the tarmac in her flight suit, clean, new, unfamiliar. The air smelled the same, though, jet fuel, metal, and courage. As she climbed the ladder into Thunderbolt 43, she paused halfway up, hand on the fuselage. Her reflection stared back from the metal, older, steadier, quieter. "I don't need to prove anything," she whispered. "Just need to remember how to breathe." She settled into the cockpit. The switches, the harness, the hum of the APU, all of it came back like muscle memory wrapped in grace. "Tower, this is Thunderbolt 43, requesting clearance for test flight." "Thunderbolt 43, cleared for runway 36. Good to have you back, Crash." She smiled, the call sign still fit. "Copy that, Tower. Let's see if these wings remember me." The aircraft rolled forward. The engines rose from hum to thunder. For a heartbeat the runway blurred, then fell away beneath her. And there it was again, that impossible feeling of weight leaving the body, of gravity forgiving her for another day. She climbed higher, the base shrinking below, the horizon stretching infinite ahead. For the first time in months, her chest didn't ache when she breathed. She wasn't chasing ghosts this time. She wasn't flying to save anyone. She was just flying. Down in the control tower, Howard watched the radar blip climb and level. Flora stood beside him, arms crossed but smiling. "Think she's finally at peace?" Flora asked. Howard shook his head slightly. "Peace isn't the goal, purpose is." Flora smiled. "Same difference, isn't it?" He looked back out the window, sunlight glinting off a lone A-10 against the blue. "Not for her," he said quietly. "She was born for noise and found meaning in silence." At 20,000 feet, Devon leveled out. The radio stayed quiet. The world stretched endless and bright. She reached down and pulled the old metal fragment from her vest pocket, THU still etched on it, the last piece of Thunderbolt 42. She held it in her palm, sunlight glinting off its surface. "Made it, girl," she whispered. "Guess we both did." She let the fragment go. It tumbled out of the cockpit window, spinning toward the clouds below, falling not like debris, but like memory finding rest. Her eyes followed it until it vanished. Then she smiled small, real and whole. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the sky just needs to be reminded who it belongs to." She banked gently, turning toward the rising sun. Below her, the desert shimmered gold. The same desert that had once tried to bury her now reflected her light back. Her father's voice echoed one last time, "The stars don't fall, kid. They dive." She whispered back, "Then let's dive." And Thunderbolt 43 tilted gracefully, slicing through the dawn like a prayer made of steel and forgiveness. Back at the airfield, the new cadets paused their drills as they looked up at the sound. One of them, the young pilot Holt, pointed skyward. "That's her, isn't it?" Barnes stood nearby, now an instructor himself, arms folded. "Yeah," he said softly, "that's her." Holt shaded her eyes. "What's she doing?" Barnes smiled faintly, reminding the sky it's still hers. They watched as the aircraft disappeared into the horizon, its engine echoing long after it vanished. No one spoke. No one needed to. Because sometimes, the loudest sound in the world isn't the roar of engines. It's the silence left behind when courage finally lands. When the official flight log was printed later that day, the entry for Thunderbolt 43 reads simply: "Flight time, 0342 hours. Pilot Capt. Devon Crash Ellis. Mission, routine test flight. Remarks returned safely, sky clear." But in the margins, written in pencil, no signature, no rank, were 5 quiet words: "She came home this time."